In this lab, we're going to be creating a battleship piece. You can see here what we're going to try and aim for. There's going to be quite a lot of techniques in this one, so I'll go as slow as I can and just follow along and you should be alright. With 3ds Max open, the first thing we want to do is bring in our side view so that we can work from it and use it as a reference. And to do that, I'm going to put it on a plane. So firstly, I'm going to make sure I'm looking at the front here, just so that I know that this is the front of my scene. I'm going to click down over here and I'm going to create a plane. I'm just going to drag it out. And what we need to do is assign a material to this plane so that it will show our image that we want to work from. So if I press M, that's going to bring up our material editor. I'm just going to get rid of that. That's one I did earlier. When you press M, it should come up looking like this. So I'm going to select a physical material over here. I'm going to click and drag it into our material workspace. And then with this, I'm going to need to pump in an image into its base color just so that it will show up on the viewport. So down here in maps, I'm going to click and drag bitmap, let go, place it onto the scene. And that's going to give me an option to open an image. And if you just go to wherever you saved sideview.png, click on it, hit open, and it's going to bring it into our workspace here. I can also double click this little square, and that just kind of opens it so we can see it a little bit easier. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pump it into our base color map. So selecting this little circle here, clicking and dragging, and moving it over to our base color map. Now if I double click here, you can see that this material is using this as its color map. You'll notice that it's not showing anything in here yet. That's because we haven't assigned this material to this plane. There's two ways we can do that. We can hit this circle, click and drag, let go on that image there. Or if I undo, I can't undo, never mind. The other way to do it is by selecting the material, making sure that plane is selected, and then you could hit assign material to selection. Doesn't matter which you use. But you'll notice we can't see the image in the viewport yet. That's just because we have to click this image here, and then up here we have an option for show shaded material in viewport. If I click that, we'll see we now get the image in the viewport. Great. Just going to minimize that out of the way. Now what we need to do is make sure that we have the right ratio, that the length and width of this image, of this plane in the viewport matches the image. So if I look in Windows and I right click this side view, hit properties, go to details, I can see that this is 960 by 535. So 960 pixels by 535 pixels. So I need the length and width to match that. Easiest way to do that is just, we can see that we've got point something of a meter, so I'm just going to do 0.960 by 0.535. And you can see that did it the opposite way I thought it would. So it should be, the length is 0.535 and the width is 0.960. So length 0.535, width 0.96. And you see there, that brings it to the right ratio as our image. Okay, now as this is the front, I want this to be on its side over here. So with the snap toggle, this angle snap toggle on, I'm going to press E for rotate, and I'm going to click and drag to make it 90 degrees that way, and then along this axis I'm going to click and drag and make it 90 degrees that way. Now I can see that it's centered a bit over here. I'm going to press W for move, make sure that I put it at 0, 0, 0. So this is perfectly centered, but I want the base of it to be sitting at 0, so I'm just going to put it there. And because I'm going to be working in this center area here, I don't want the reference image to be there, so I'm just going to move it back over this way a bit. Okay, now when I'm working on everything over here, I don't want to accidentally be able to click and move this, so I'm going to freeze it. So if I select it, hit right click, free selection, you'll see that it goes grey. That's no use to us. So if I undo that, instead we can make sure that it doesn't do that. We right click it, go to object properties, untick show frozen in grey here, hit OK. Now if I right click the object and free selection, it stays with its background image, but also we can't select it, which is perfect. Good reference for us to work from. Okay, now in the center here, I'm going to bring in some geometry to work with. I'm first going to build the base of this battleship. So with the crate down here, I'm going to hit box, and I'm just going to kind of click and drag a rough shape first. Don't worry about it too much yet. And there we go. So if I look down here, if I just zoom in on here, press C, press C, press C, I can change the, remember you can change all of these. So I might want this one to be default shading, just so I can see what's going on. And I like that. So down here on our left side, if you just make sure you have default shading, not wireframe, just means that this image down here will always be there, just so we have a good reference. Okay, now with this box we just created selected, I'm going to go over into the modifier tab over here, and I'm going to make it roughly the right length and width, and I think by accident I've actually made it pretty much the right length, but let's just play with that value anyway. So I'm going to make it about 0.77. Just make sure that it matches your viewport down here. Remember, if we're on perspective, we couldn't really tell. You see here, I can't really tell if that's the right size, but I can click right up here, then press U to go to orthographic. Now I can see the right size of it. Another handy tool we have in 3ds Max is making our objects transparent so we can see how it looks against our background object. And the way to do that is by pressing Alt X. And I use that quite a lot. That just shows everything, well, makes it transparent. So we can see that it's looking about the right size. So just play with that value and get it about the right size. Okay, then to get out of the orthographic view, I can just press P to go back to perspective. Then if I hit Z, that'll focus back on the object, and I can now look around. And then press Alt X to get it back to normal shading, and we've got it in the center here. So I'm going to just play with these values here and bring them down a bit, and I'm only going to bring in what I need. So I think I'm going to have probably 6 length segments, 1 width segment, and no height segments. I'll be fine. Okay, so we first need to get it the rough shape of this battleship, and to do that we're going to need an editable poly modifier. So over up here, if I click down the drop list, hit E, that'll skip to all the E ones, and I'm going to hit edit poly. So if I hit vertex, we can start editing the vertices. What I'm going to want to do, looking at the top, I'm going to select the front ones, and I'm going to hold Control, which will let me double select, increase my add to my selection. So with those ones selected and holding Control, now I can select both the front and back. I'm going to press R for scale, and I'm just going to make them smaller, probably quite a bit, maybe to about there. And I'm also going to do the same for the next inner ones, so I'm just going to look at the top again, press U just to make sure I'm in orthographic, select those, hold Control, select these, press R for scale, whoop, and undo that because I got the wrong selection, R for scale, and I'm just going to get it to about something like that. Okay, P back to perspective, Z to focus on it, Now I can rotate and look around, and that's kind of a rough shape. The other part with this shape, if I look at my reference image, which is this one here, you can see that it kind of tapers in at the top. So to do that, if I look at my front view, press U to go to orthographic, hit vertex, select the top ones, then scale down on the x-axis a bit. I can replicate that kind of tapered look. And if I look back at it, you can see we've got the rough base shape. That's the first bit done. Anyway, let's call this battleship underscore base. So just select it. Up here you can change the name, and we can also change the color. I'm just going to make it gray, just so it's roughly the right color. Alright, now let's make this little front piece here. Not exactly what it is, but if I click down into, if I look at my reference image, you can see that it's kind of just a triangle poking out of the top. Alright, and to make that, I'm just going to start with a box. So I'm going to click and drag a box into the scene. Don't worry about its dimensions yet. And I'm going to make its length, width, and height segments just 1 for just now. I hit W for move, just center it. I always like to center every object first before I start doing things with them. Now if I move it, making sure I'm just using the Z and Y plane here, just so it stays centered, and everywhere I move it's going to stay in the middle. I'm going to put it roughly in shape. In place. Now if I look back here, hit our right, hit U to go back to orthographic, just so we have the right kind of scaling. And I'll put it roughly in place. Okay, what you can see here is that I didn't make this the right height or kind of the right taper. So I'm just going to fix that first. So selecting this bottom base, hitting vertex, highlighting these top vertices, and I'm just going to click and drag them up here. Then I'm actually going to scale them in along the y-axis as well, just to get the right kind of shape. I can see through it now, make sure that is the right kind of size. Okay, now with this bit up here, I'll move that roughly in shape, and I'm going to need to add an edit poly onto it. So with this selected, over down in the drop box, hit E to get to all of the E's, that's just a shortcut. Hit edit poly. Now I can do the same. So if I hit Alt X, I can see through. I can select these top vertices, drag that down, select these vertices, drag them over, and that should be the exact right shape. I'm also just going to make sure that they go into the, just a tiny bit into the geometry below. Okay, and then I unselect these vertices. I can zoom out, and I'm going to rotate and look at it from the top. I'm still in orthographic, so I need to hit perspective, and I'm going to need to scale these ones in to make it a triangle. I'm going to make it not transparent by hitting Alt X, select the vertices here, select these front ones, and R for scale, take them in to something about that. Unselect the vertex here, and now I can see that I've got the front triangle piece. Look at my reference, make sure it looks kind of right. It's always good to look back and forth between your reference images just to make sure you're on the right track. And I've lost it, 2 seconds. And yeah, that looks about right. So I better give it a name. I don't know what to call it because I'm not sure what it's supposed to be. Battleship front. That'll do, and I'll make it grey. Okay, As you should remember, what I keep stressing with the last module last week is to make sure your hierarchies are right. So with the select and link clicked up here, click and drag and make it a child of the base, just so it's all proper. Okay, now the next piece I'll make is this gun. At least that's obvious. So again, looking at my reference, I can see that it's kind of it's not a square, it's kind of circular. So I'm going to start from a cylinder to make this. So over on create, I'm going to select cylinder. Just kind of look over here, click and drag. Now I get something rough. And I'm going to press W for move. Make sure I center it. 0, 0, 0. I'm going to move it up so I can see. And I'm going to look back at my right viewport, hit U for orthographic, hit Alt X so it's transparent. I'm going to move it roughly in place. Okay. Now what I can do with these parameters in the modifier tab with it selected is I could change the radius, bring it down, just to kind of match this here. The height segments, I really don't need that much, so I'm going to take it down to 1. Sides, I'll keep it 18, that'll be fine. Oop. And if I come out, press P for perspective, Z to focus, hit Alt X. Okay, I'm not going to use 18, there's a reason for that. I'll talk about it later when it comes to potentially doing symmetry. You usually want to make sure you have a edge that lines up with the center. If you just make the sides, make sure it's about 16. Actually, yeah, make sure it's exactly 16. So sides 16. It just means we have a line that's actually on the axis, which we'll need later. I've accidentally moved my base, so I'm just going to put that back to 0 there. Okay, what we might want to do is, just so we don't accidentally move the pieces we've already worked with, we can freeze them as well. So with them selected, right click, freeze selection. That just means we won't accidentally move them whilst we're working on the pieces that we're making. And I'm going to make it gray. Let's call this Battleship Gun Front. Alright, now you'll notice that it kind of tapers up the top here. We're going to need to make sure our piece does that as well. So I'm going to add an edit polygon to it, which is here. And don't edit patch, that's wrong, edit poly. Okay, I'm going to select this top polygon and I'm looking, so I can look down at this viewport here, or just look at it here. So with this top polygon selected, I'm going to want to extrude it upwards and then take it in a bit. So we could use a bevel tool for that. So if I click the settings here on the bevel tool, so with that top polygon selected, you can see it's selected here, and if I hit here to bring up the bevel settings, I can get some options. So I can change the height. I'm going to make sure its height is about right. I'm going to hit Alt X just so it's see-through, and then I can take in the scale of the bit we just created and make it match to something about there. Then I can hit the tick button for OK, unselect the polygon, hit P, C to look around again, hit Alt X to make sure to get it non-transparent again, and I'm just going to look around and get a feel for it, and I think it's pretty good. Look at my reference image again. So you can see that it's not completely circular, it's kind of a rounded rectangle. And the way I'm going to make it kind of feel like that, if I look at the top, hit U to get it into orthographic. I'm going to select the vertex I'm going to select the outer ones, scale them in a bit like that, and do the same for these ones. And just kind of make it more of a rounded rectangle as opposed to a circle. We might just select the top ones here, scale them in a bit, and the same for down here, just a little bit. Okay, I think that now looks more like a rounded square. Now I'm going to make this little kind of turret, which just seems like a cylinder tilted on its side. So a cheeky, quick shortcut I could do here is I could actually take this one, drag it out, and then you might say, Jamie, but hold on, this isn't a cylinder now, it's a rounded square. But if I just delete this editable poly on this one, we'll get back to the cylinder. And if I take the radius down, and then let's rotate it roughly in position. I'm going to look at right, press U for orthographic view, and let's just move it roughly into place, make it see-through to have a look. Looks like it's about that. Change the height to match, and then maybe the radius just down a bit. And it looks like this has a tiny kind of bevel at the end as well. So I'm going to go to add and edit polygon top, select polygon, get to an angle where I can see it, and go back, press U, and I'm going to click bevel, get the settings up by that little box there, increase the height a bit, and bring down the radius just a bit to about there. Click tick to be OK. Uncheck polygon here just so I can have a look around. Press Alt X to get it back. And P for perspective. And I think that's good. Yeah, that looks about right. Well, let's have a look at our reference. Yeah, it's close enough. Although it does look like this is a bit narrower than our one. It looks like it's the same, just a bit thicker than our cylinder, so we can do that pretty easily. If I select this, go to vertex, press Ctrl A for everything, then scale with R, and then if I just scale it in on the x-axis to probably about there, uncheck vertex, I think that looks quite a bit more like what we've got. We don't have to be 100% accurate for this. We're not going for a absolute ridiculously accurate interpretation of it. Just something that looks like it's good enough. And I think that does. So again, hierarchies always important. So let's make this turret, well, the barrel, a child of the base, and the base a child of. Now you'll see here I can't actually select the base of the ship because it's frozen. So I'll have to right click anywhere on the viewport that doesn't have anything and unfreeze all. Now that brings it back, so I can select the base of the turret, select the hierarchy, and make it a child of the ship. So now we're all good. And undo to get it back there. You can see now if I rotate that, we get them both, which is great, but I better call them, give them proper names. So battleship gun front, I'm just going to copy that, and then in here it says, you see, because we made it a copy from this original one, it's given it a similar name but just added a number at the end. I'm just going to call it barrel at the end. So battleship come from barrel. You can call it whatever you want, just as long as it all makes sense. Okay, now I'll take there. I'm going to select everything here now, right click, and freeze selection, just so we can't touch anything else whilst we're working away. Oh, this isn't frozen either. Need to freeze that again. There we go. Now everything's frozen. Okay, so let's build this, I guess it's a bridge and the interior. So we'll build this kind of shape here first. What we're going to do is we're going to actually make all of this bit one object. So we're going to start from the base, go up, and make it one object. And we're going to start with a cylinder. So let's just look at our reference. So it's kind of a squished cylinder with sharp edges. Almost a similar shape to this, but a bit more rounded, I guess. So if I create a cylinder, click and drag, and make something like that. So I've got 1, 1, 16, which should be fine. Yep. And I'm going to press W for move and center it. So 0, 0, 0. Always good to keep things centered. Then let's move it up roughly in place. Look at my side, orthographic. Something about there. Now if I go into the modify tab for the parameters, can increase the radius, get it to match, and increase the height to get it to match. Okay, and looking at a reference, it's, as we say, it's a bit squished, so it's not going to be a perfect circle. You can see there, obviously, it goes over the edges. So of course we add an edit poly, and I'm probably going to go to the top, select all of them, press R for scale, and take it in on the x-axis. I'm just going to go back and forth between my reference just to kind of make sure it feels about right. So it looks like it's a bit more pointed at the edges. So what I could do is get it roughly there, then select just the edges. So the 3 polygons either side. Hold Control. Oops. So highlight and select. Hold Control to increase your selection. And then maybe I could just bring them in, make them a bit more pointed. And then maybe I could take these ones individually and yeah, something like that. Don't worry if it doesn't look exactly the same, where you're never going to get it exactly the same as what I've got, but just as long as you feel that it looks close enough to this. Okay, so to get it being one object and continue going up, we're going to extrude the top face here, but we're going to need to make sure that it's in the right place as well. So what we're going to do, so I'm going to select the polygon. I'm going to, select the top polygon, but I'm going to press delete and get rid of it. Go to edge or border. I'm going to work with edge. And then if I double click this edge, any of these edges, it will select this loop. Now what I can do, instead of clicking extrude all the time, I can press W for move, then hold shift, and it will create geometry every time for me. So that's just a nice quicker way to kind of do this kind of work. I find it much easier. So let's just start with that. So if we hit R for scale, we can also do it whilst we scale. So on this YX axis down here, I'm going to hold shift, click and drag, and you can see we can make some new geometry. So I'm going to go about here for just now, press W for move, bring this back over here along the Y axis, and I'm just going to raise it a tiny bit up because we don't want vertices to overlap each other, and move it, let's see, move it roughly in place. So I can actually bring it up just to make sure I've got the right size, rotate around just so I make sure I get this axis, make it a little bit bigger. Whoops, double click to get the ring back. Move over here, look at the right view, press U, if I hold Alt X just to get a better view. So I can just scale from here as well, something like that. That looks good. I'm just going to move that back down just to about here. Okay, now I can hold Shift again. I've got this ring selected still, and I look back over to it, and I can hold Shift again and bring this up. Excellent. And I can do the same again to get this next bit. Hold Shift up to about here, and I can scale. So I could actually do this here because this is a top view. I want to scale both along the Y and X axis, which I can't really see from here, but down over here at this top viewport, if I look at top, make sure I've got orthographic on, I can scale it from here, and I know that's going to keep it along both the Y and X axis. So if I increase that, press W for move, bring it over, looks like I need to go a little bit more, R for scale, looking down here at the top view. You can obviously remember you can just make this a top view, you can make any one of these a top view, just make sure you use this and go to top. And I'm just going a tiny bit bigger, press W for move it down that way a bit. Maybe it needs to be a bit bigger for me. And there we go. Then if you middle click on a viewport, that just centers it again. Well, makes that your active viewport. Sometimes you don't want to click on a viewport because you can accidentally move things. So middle clicking on a viewport will select it without moving anything. Alright, I'm going to select this edge again, just double click. I'm going to hold Shift, drag up, and get this one. And now we need to scale it down to make kind of a circle to do this bit. So again, looking at this top viewport, I'm going to hit R for scale, hold Shift, drag it down. And then because I need to make it a circle, I can just probably drag it down that Y axis by scaling. That looks like a circle again. I want to put it roughly in place. So I can't see up here where it needs to be, but if I raise it a tiny bit there, then I know where it should be. And I can scale it to make sure it's right. Something about that. And then I'll bring it back down. Okay. Now if I hold, just get it to about there. So here's a handy tip. Say I've left that there, but I want this to be exactly in line. These two lines to be exactly on the same plane. I can highlight all the vertices, and then what I can do over here, there's Make Planner, which has X, Y, and Z. That will flatten all the vertices to one of these axes. So it'll be the Y axis, because it's up and down. So if I select these top vertices and then hit Y over here, oops, it's not the Y axis, Z, it's the Z axis. It never makes sense in my head which one it should be, so usually I end up just clicking and undoing until it's the right one. But yeah, Make Planner down there, you can get these to be perfectly aligned again, which is good. Okay, select the edge again, double click the circle here, so make sure you just click one of the edges that are in the ring. Okay, back to here, I'm going to hold Shift and click up, get it to be the right size. So I'm going to say to about there, and then I'm going to need to hold Shift again, click, get to about there. Looking at it up now on the top viewport, I'm going to press R for scale, make that about the right radius. Middle click the viewport back up here, press W for move, hold Shift, click up, back down to this top one, middle click to activate it, hold R, press R for scale, and scale it in to about the same. Well, we want it to be the same as the inner one again, so we'll go to about there. Looking back up here, press W, get it to about there, perfect, and hold Shift all the way up to the top, then Shift again to about there, to this viewport, scale it down. Okay, excellent. Now if I press P for perspective and Z to focus on his bit, and press Alt X, get it back to non-transparent, and you can see already now when we look at it, we've pretty much made that shape pretty perfectly, I'd say. That looks about right. And this little open bit up here, what we can do is we can select border. So border here, click on it, and then we can press cap. And that will just cap it off for us in a moment. That's not technically the right way to do it. We'll go into that a little bit more later, but for just now, you can just select the border and hit cap. And yeah, there we go. So I'm going to untick there, unclick there, and with it selected, better call it something. Let's call it battleship. Let's call it bridge. And I'll make it child later. Just instead of unfreezing everything and making them children and doing the hierarchy, I'll just wait till the end and do all that at once. But I'll make it roughly the same color, and now I'll freeze this just so we don't touch it again by accident. So it's right click, freeze selection.